How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Boy Light Hobby Time. Today I'm making a snow globe. I scoured all the stores in my local area looking for a blank snow globe, and this is what I came up with. But it has one fatal flaw. And you'll see what that is in a few minutes. I looked at the label that came on the packaging and I found an interesting warning. It said not intended for use with water. Strange for a snow globe. Luckily for me, it didn't say anything about resin. The plan is to flip the ball over, build my diorama and suspend it in the middle of the ball, while I fill the ball all the way up to the top with resin. The thing I wanted in this snow globe was a lightsaber, which I'm going to be making from this 3-volt LED filament that has both leads on one side, which is pretty cool. I broke out my styrene tube and rod collection, which I keep in this DIY storage solution that nobody's ever made fun of me for in the comment section last time it appeared in a video. The original plan was to make the lightsaber from scratch using various sizes of tubes and rings, some of styrene, some of metal. Before doing that, I trimmed down the excess on the filament so that it would fit better in a smaller tube. The goal was to recreate Luke's lightsaber from Return of the Jedi. That's the same one shown at the beginning of this video with the green blade. I was a few pieces in when I remembered that I had the exact lightsaber that I needed in 1:12 scale from a General Grievous kit. And you know what they say, don't reinvent the wheel if it's not going to be as good as the original trilogy. I drilled a hole down the center for some wires, which I connected to the filament and protected with a little bit of heat shrink. And even more rewarding than making your own lightsaber from scratch is finding the perfect piece in your bits box that you might not use otherwise. In hindsight, I probably would have mounted the lightsaber on something other than a rock, and you'll see why later in the video. After drilling a hole, I glued the lightsaber to the rock, and then I cut up a small piece of a straw which I stuck over the blade to mask it from the primer, which I applied using the airbrush. After everything had been painted black, I started throwing on the other colors. I painted the lightsaber with liquid mirror, which is a highly reflective metallic paint from Stuart Semple, and happens to be the majority of the color that covers this hilt. After the silver, there was an accent of brass on the collar, just underneath the emitter, as well as on the ignition. The next step was to cover the blade in a transparent green, which does not stick to the silicone very well, but I followed that up with a gloss clear coat over top, which should keep it safe from the resin. After that, it was a quick dry brush on the rocks, followed by an oil wash, which I gently dabbed away, and the lightsaber was done. I was also sure to test the circuit along the whole process to make sure I hadn't made any fatal flaws. I followed the painting step with a styrene tube right up the middle of the rock to keep the wires from moving around and also be a little lollipop stick that I could suspend the saber from while the resin cures. I put my helping hands on a little box that was the right size to keep them at the correct height, and after that it was time to mix up all the resin. This is a slow curing, deep pour epoxy resin with a 4-inch depth capacity. The snow globe is almost 5 inches in diameter, which is more than 4 inches, and it could have been an issue, but I mixed it very thoroughly. I didn't have to worry about leaks because it will all be contained in that glass ball, and it won't leave in the end. I also vacuumed out all of the bubbles with my vacuum chamber, and I left the window open in the workshop to keep the room nice and cool during the curing. The extra inch was a calculated rule break, and I knew that it would most likely be just fine. What was not a calculated rule break were these glitter snowflakes, which I bought last year and decided to throw in on a whim, which all lost their reflectiveness as soon as they touched the resin. This is just a reminder to not do anything on a whim, but if you're going to break the rules, do it calculatedly. When the glitter had been distributed evenly, I poured it and the resin into the ball. I was able to use geometry this time to find the exact amount of volume that the ball had, which was really nice. I used my butane torch to pop the few bubbles that did form from the pour, and then I left that alone for the next 3 days, and I enjoyed my Christmas. 72 hours later I came back, and the resin looked like it had cured just fine, although a lot of the glitter did settle to the bottom. But there was one pressing question on my mind, and that was, would the light still work? And it did. The next step in this build brings up the fatal flaw with this snow globe, and that is that the base is made of glass. I decided to throw this foam thing and caution to the wind and drill a hole in the glass like a man. I didn't go to the store and buy a bit that would be used for this type of thing. Instead, I decided to experiment with a bunch of things that were not intended for this kind of thing. And while my dingus past self tries to drill a hole in this glass, I'd like you all to take a look at the snow globes made by my patrons. The art challenge theme for December was snow globes, and I think they all did a great job. Thank you and excellent job to all the patrons who participated last month. It was now double the time that it would have taken me to get to the store and back with a proper bit, but I was getting impatient, so I turned up the speed and I finally had a breakthrough. For 1/1,000,000th of a second, I had a perfectly sized hole and a complete base. After that, I just had 2 broken pieces of glass. I decided to bite the bullet, swallow my pride, and take some measurements and then head to the store to find a non-glass object to make another base out of. What I found was this wooden box, which when used incorrectly looks like a Funkopop version of Jabba's palace, which conveniently happens to be from the same movie as the lightsaber in the snow globe. Which actually leads me to what I would have replaced the rock with had I started with Jabba's palace in mind, and that would be R2-D2's head. I know it's not lit when it comes shooting out of his head, but I still think that would have been pretty cool. After drilling a hole through the lid of the box, I threaded this jeweler's saw through the hole, which I borrowed from my grandpa. I then followed my traced line closely, but not too close, till I'd cut out the center. After that, I refined the shape of the hole using my Dremel and sanding drum. After that, the lid was ready to be glued to the underside of the box. I did check the fit of the ring against the snow globe first to make sure everything fit snugly, which it did, and then I glued the wooden pieces together using some wood glue. I pressed the pieces together firmly, and to hold that together while the glue cured, I used some CA glue. After that, it was time to carve out a spot for the switch. I drilled a pilot hole using my pin vise, and then I used a Dremel to widen the hole enough for a small sanding drum to get in, which I could use to make the hole nice and round. It's certainly not perfect, but luckily it's on the underside, and the fit is just right. The next step was to glue the battery housing in place. I heat treated it and glued it in place using some super glue, followed by 2 small screws. The wood that it's screwed into is pretty thin, so that's why I also used the super glue. I then screwed the potentiometer in place, and after trimming some wires, I connected them together. With the wiring figured out, it was time to get this base to look a little bit more the part. I primed it with a sandy beige, and then I began applying the other colors with the airbrush. I applied all of the additional colors, and eventually I ended up re-priming the whole thing using black on accident, which basically meant I started the whole paint job over. But I went with more of a reddish look for the lower section, rather than what is probably the more accurate sandy color. And I think it looks Tatooiney enough. After that, I painted the inside with black 4.0. With the paint job done, it was finally time to stick the top and the bottom together. After pressing them together, there was a little bit of wiggle room, so I removed part of the rubber gasket, and then I used this glass shard that I had lying around to mix up a 2-part epoxy glue. I probably could have attempted to use this glue to stick the original base back together, but I'm going to send this snow globe to one of you, so I didn't want to risk it shattering on the way. Stay tuned to the end to hear how it could be yours. When the top and the bottom were firmly glued together, I flipped the whole thing over and I wrapped up the wiring. When that was done, I called it good. If you would like to win this snow globe, please leave a comment on this video as well as one other video of mine that you would consider your favorite. And also please do make sure to be subscribed. I'd have to say, a large amount of glitter did settle at the bottom of this thing while it was curing, so that may detract from the top-down viewing experience, but the side viewing angle is the preferred one, in my opinion. And that is it for 2024. I hope you guys enjoyed this year of videos. My first video next year will be my 1 million subscriber special, and I have some fun things planned for that. Huge shout out as always to all of my patrons. You guys are the best. Hope you all have an awesome week and a happy new year. I'll see you next time.